Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the BS and Beer Show. BS stands for Building Science, and beer is not the only beverage that's allowed. I have some scripted opening remarks tonight because the way my week is going, if I didn't think about what I was going to say to start this show, I could see it going off the rails really fast. So I am Brian Pontalillo. I am from Fine Homebuilding Magazine and Green Building Advisor, and tonight I am drinking a homebrewed, somewhere in there, fruit punch kombucha. BS and Beer is an open source grassroots program meant to encourage and help building professionals to share their knowledge and experience and to push forward the cause of building better houses for all. And for more information about the show and tips on how to start a local chapter, visit bsandbeer.com. Tonight our topic is the intersection of preservation and performance, and we have two distinguished guests. We have architectural historian, builder, and author Brent Hull, and Laura Case from the Southface Institute. And we'll do a much better job of introducing Brent and Laura in just a few minutes. And then once we introduce them, they'll do a great job of helping us understand the importance of old homes and how to work with them well. Justin Fink is also joining us tonight. Justin's a longtime editor at Fine Homebuilding as well. Most of you probably know Justin. And Justin and I have often debated this topic in the context of specific homes that we've either been studying at work or through decisions that we're making on projects of our own. And it was one of those discussions that happened most recently that gave us the idea for this episode. When I've debated with Justin, if I've taken the side of progress in this debate, please understand that my experience is limited, it's often anecdotal, and that I'm simply not nostalgic or sentimental for old things. That's just my personality. That said, I have observed in towns that I've lived in with significant historic districts or really strict architectural review boards based in preservation, that a lot of homes end up being reserved for the wealthy, and remodels seem to fail to meet modern standards of safety, durability, efficiency, comfort, etc. So in short, when it comes to this issue, I kind of feel that if a home is truly worth preserving, if it really has lessons to teach us, we should certainly be willing to make that home a museum so that current and future generations can benefit from what it has to teach us. I feel that when we can reuse and salvage materials, when that makes sense from the perspectives of resource efficiency and budget, and to keep viable materials out of the landfill, we should certainly take that path. And that when remodeling an existing home makes economic sense and offers a low carbon opportunity that building new wouldn't, I certainly think we should follow that path. And I do think that when we decide to preserve a home and hold that preservation to high standards, that should not happen at the expense of safety, durability, efficiency, comfort, and meeting at least minimum code levels in those areas. And moreover, I think social equity should always be part of this discussion. So as much as I love a good argument, and we could probably put one on, you probably wouldn't learn much from it. So tonight's show is not meant to be a debate. We really do want to get to learning from Brent and Laura. But with all that said, I will turn it over to Justin, who rarely agrees with me on this topic.
Well, yeah. And you don't want to have to be the one who argues with Brian, because he has like a crystal brain and he just will chew through any argument you might have. But I will always do my best. When Brian asked me to come on and talk, I quickly realized that I think I'm the only one in this audience who actually wants to save all the old houses. Hence the banner my wife has behind me here. But then I was very pleased to hear that he had Brent and Laura coming on, so I don't feel alone in this mission. I just wanted to hit a couple of really high level points before we turn it over to them, because this is the kind of stuff that I hear a lot, and I want to just kind of clear up some things. First, historic home misconceptions. People go nuts thinking about if I buy an old house, I'm not going to be able to do what I want with it. The truth is that even if you're listed on the National Register or State Register, they place no restrictions on what you do to your house unless you're a federal owner, or you're taking federal assistance from the government. Otherwise, you can do whatever you want with your old house. Typically, the only historic properties that are subject to them interfering and telling you you can't do what you want to do are local historic districts. And those are community organizations. And the entire point of those is to keep all those old buildings looking nice and the community revitalized, and to give the older area an economic boost. Just a couple other quick points here. According to some Brookings Institute data that I looked up in preparation for this, they're forecasting that between the years 2004 and 2030, we're on track to have demolished and replaced 1/3 of the U.S. building stock. That's 82 billion square feet. The energy to do this demo and rebuild is enough to provide power to 37 million people for 10 years. That's the state of California for 10 years just on what we've ripped down. And all of the building-related construction and demolition debris is 2/3 of all the non-industrial solid waste generation in the U.S. 2/3. So that brings this question, all right, new versus old. We'll bring it back to what Martin Holliday said a while back in his article about deep energy retrofits. He found that it would cost about $100,000 to improve the efficiency of a 100-year-old single-family home to deep energy retrofit levels, which we know is about 75%. So according to a 2018 census, the average new house sold for $377,000. And according to the National Association of Realtors in that same year, the average price of an existing home was $293,000. So the old house is $83,000 less expensive, already carbon neutral. And if you wanted to spend all that money to do a deep energy retrofit, you'd probably only have to throw in about $16,000 of your own dollars to get to the point where you're paying the same as you would for a new house. And I would venture that if you're going to all that trouble of doing a deep energy retrofit, that your old house is now way more efficient than any new house you're going to buy, unless Emily designed it or Mike designed it. And just couple last little points. There's nothing wrong with upgrading old houses. Storm windows, they provide equivalent performance to modern windows with ridiculously lower return on investment. The siting of old houses is typically was already considering passive heating and cooling. They're perfectly acceptable to put PV panels on them. The wall cavities are usually empty, makes it really easy to insulate. And the old growth lumber and materials are just super resilient. So I think there's just tons of reasons to reuse old houses. I'm not going to sit here and try and make an argument about the sentimental value. To me, they offer a ton of sentimental value. But I know that not everybody agrees with that, and that's fine. But there is one practical thing I think we need to keep them around for, and that's that we've forgotten how to design. And if we get rid of these examples of when we used to know how to design good houses, even with them around, we're not designing well. So what's it going to look like if we get rid of them completely? And you could make the argument, well, we've had them around for hundreds of years, so didn't we learn everything we can learn from them? Well, clearly not. not from what I'm seeing. So with that, I'll turn it over to people who know more about this than I do.
I think that before we get started with our panelists, we have a little bit to go on that. And I probably straddle the fence, but a little bit closer to Brian's side. Sorry, Justin. And there's a lot of chatter.
I expected it.
There's a lot of chatter in the chat box, which actually makes a lot of sense, which I don't know where you're doing your 100,000 deep energy retrofits, because maybe some of the old housing stock in Maine is what we find is it's really, people haven't continued to care for it. And it's not being used the way that it was originally intended. And we have forgotten to design. If we go back and we look at the Italians who just kept track of the stuff that they had added to it, kept it well kept, there's a lot to be said for that. And I, as an architect, love historic things. So there's design qualities to that, but it adds a lot more challenges as well. So I'm really excited for our guests.
Challenges are fun.
I'm really excited for our guests to jump in on that. So I won't put my spin on that. Emily Mottram, an architect in Maine. I'm drinking an IPA from Side by Each called It's About Time. So I thought that was fitting for tonight. Just a little bit for everybody who's just jumping on and joining us. Please put your questions in the chat box. Make sure that when you click to write your comments in the chat box to pick all panelists and all attendees so that everybody can see your comments in the chat box. Also, if you are looking at the screen and you can only see the person who's talking in the upper right-hand corner, there should be a box that says speaker view or gallery view. If you hit gallery view, you should be able to see everybody at the same time. Tonight, we're going to go through presentations, then we're going to have discussions from the chat box and our hosts with each other, and then we'll have questions from everybody else. So that's the setup of today's show. We'll be done at 7:30. But also, if you have trouble finding the chat box, it should be kind of popping up on the bottom of your screen. If you click on it, you can move it around. So if it's covering the panelists, you can move it off to the side. So put your questions in the chat box as we go along, and we'll try to get that up and in front of our panelists if we have time as it goes through. So if you have questions, remember all panelists and all attendees so everybody can see it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Travis to give you a little more intro on our guests.
Hey, I'm Travis Brungart, a builder in Kansas City, actually Prairie Village, it doesn't matter, Kansas City area. Anyway, this is the last little bit before we get to the guests that you actually tuned in to hear from. I've got a few announcements to make, and then I'm going to read the bios for our esteemed panel. Coming up, you're probably already reading The New Carbon Architecture by Bruce King so that you can be ready for book club, which is coming, 9/24. Good times. It's right around the corner. There's a Q&A on GBA between Kylie and our good friend Mike Maines, who's in the chat box tonight, but not on screen. Kylie Jacques and Mike Maines were discussing some on the book, so there's a Q&A up on GBA about that. I've got 3 quick things I want to announce. Our good friend Christoph is doing a presentation at AIA Austin. It's a virtual presentation on, let's see, the 19th through the 21st, which means you've already missed 2 days of it. I'm sorry. Tomorrow, you can catch the last bit. The next show that I wanted to make you aware of is Keep Craft Alive, powered by Fine Home Building's free webinar on August 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern, how to find and retain a team to build high-quality, high-performance homes. I think Ben Bogey's on that one, and he's a good friend of the show, and everything that comes out of FHB is good, especially the BS and Beer show, right, guys? That's it for my announcements, and now we can get to what you tuned in for. We've got Brent Hull and Laura Case joining us tonight, thank goodness. Let's start with Brent. He's the owner and president of Hull Millwork and Hull Homes. He's a nationally recognized authority on historic design, architecturally correct moldings, and millwork, trained in the art of museum quality preservation at the prestigious North Bennett Street School in Boston. Brent is also the author of 3 books, one of which I've read, Traditional American Rooms. It was a celebrating style craftsmanship in historic woodwork and historic millwork, a guide to restoring and recreating doors, windows, and moldings from the late 19th century to the early 20th century. And his most recent book is Building a Timeless House in an Instant Age. That's a good one. That's the one I caught. The other 2 are probably great too. But this was written to help builders and homeowners build authentic and beautiful homes. He's the recipient of 5 John Staub Awards for classical architecture and craftsmanship and historic restoration. Brent has been a builder, a remodeler, and a millwork owner for over 25 years. His company has completed hundreds of projects, and he has vast experience in the field. He is a lover of historic millwork and historic design. Thanks for joining us, Brent. Anything you want to add about yourself? That's a good bio, but I feel like you're leaving out the really important stuff. What kind of, you got a dog, what's your dog's name?
2 dogs now. I've got Romeo, he's an 8-year-old lab, and then I got a 2-year-old bulldog, English bulldog. He's a nut. And good dogs, good family. All my kids are grown and out of the house, and so, yeah, doing good.
That's what people tune in for. It's dog names and what are you drinking? Those are was that a Shiner I saw? You're in Texas, right?
Yeah, Good Eye. Yeah.
It's a Bach.
Shiner Bach. Yeah, that's a Texas favorite, kind of a great beer.
Prost, my friend. Next up, we have Laura Case. Thanks for joining us tonight, Laura. She's the Director of Technical Services at Southface. She provides leadership and technical expertise for programs that support Southface's mission to drive our communities towards a regenerative economy, responsible resource use, and social equity through a healthy built environment for all. Programs and service offerings that Laura manages include organizational sustainability planning, building assessments, consulting, and certifications on the commercial, residential, and community levels. Certification programs include LEED, EarthCraft, National Green Building Standard, Enterprise Green Communities, and Energy Star. Laura has decades of experience in commercial construction project management, campus planning, and developing design standards for clients including the state of Georgia and Emory University. For fun, Laura renovates her house, climbs mountains, paddles, and swims. What else, Laura? What are we missing? Give us the goods. What are you
Drinking
drinking?
beer.
All right.
I'm not drinking right now though, but I have a Stella over here in the wings. So
Very classy. With
Yeah.
that said, we've got everything laid out for a great show. Let's kick off the presentations.
So, Brent, do you want to go first?
I'm from the South. I was going to let the ladies go first. So I'll do
Laura?
What
Sure.
a gentleman.
You're up.
all right, let's do this. Right there. All right. Can you see it all right?
Yes.
All right,
Okay.
great. So I'm going to talk today or this evening about our EarthCraft, Southface's EarthCraft Sustainable Preservation Program. So we have our own suite of certification programs, and they are called EarthCraft. And this is the one, I'm going to talk about the one that is for sustainable preservation. And let me figure out how, oh, sorry. Okay. So this is Southface, where I work. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Kind of already talked about how we promote sustainable homes, workplaces, and communities through education, research, advocacy, and technical assistance. I'm on the technical assistance side of that of that area. Did I say we're in Atlanta, Georgia? We're in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, y'all. Anyway, EarthCraft Sustainable Preservation Program was developed through partnership with Southface, the Greater Atlanta Home Builders Association, and the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservations. And a little bit about the program. It's designed for historic renovation and restoration projects. There's pathways for single family, multifamily, and commercial. And the big piece of it is third-party verification of the building components and systems. So it's basically what that means when you say it's for historic renovation or restoration projects is that it's for projects that are implementing the Secretary of State Interior Standards or local or state historic preservation office recommendations. We like to see projects that are either in a designated area or neighborhood or themselves are designated historic. So the program includes a site assessment, design reviews, where we sit down with the design team and talk about, the details and the type of equipment they're putting in, et cetera. There's field inspections for air seal. If they're doing most of the projects do air sealing. There's methods to do it where you're not spray foaming on historic parts of the building. So we kind of talk through those different methods. And it's really designed for climates for hot, humid, because that's where we are. I think most of it can be applied to other climate zones, but that's kind of where we are, what it was developed to be. It does include air tightness testing of envelope and ducts, and is intended to be a supplement to the preservation best practices and recommendations. So I'm going to dive into some of our case studies. So this is a historic building. It doesn't really look to me like, something I'd just say, hey, that's historic. However, it was built in 1953 and it was designated, it's in a historic community of Atlanta. And I think the cool thing was the original owner was the first Black licensed master electrician in the city. What I've heard from the the folks that actually worked on this project, unfortunately, I didn't get to go there, but it had a master controller in the master bedroom, master bedroom, that actually turned the lights off and on for all on the inside of the house. So way before, he was thinking way ahead of his time, before Bluetooth and all that. So here's some of the achievements of the program and the team. So it got pretty good tightness for the envelope. The ductwork was replaced and put in conditioned space pretty tightly. Hot water pipes insulated, water sense fixtures and Energy Star, and a 15 SEER HVAC unit with dehumidification and outside air. So that's that one. We've got a similar project by the same group, by the Historic Trust, in another nearby neighborhood on Mosley Place. Of course, that one was brick and this one is wood frame. It's a 1920s bungalow. And both of these are affordable housing. So they qualify for affordable housing and they're up for sale. Well, one of them, the brick one, sold. I think this one's still for sale. So, and they were both examples. They were kind of teaching tools for the Georgia Trust, for contractors and interested people to come in and actually see these in progress and how you, how you can renovate a historic building and make it, perform well. So this one was a little more challenging because it had balloon framing, has a crawl space. It was in such bad shape. Both of them were vacant for a while. It was in best shape that they had to patch the holes in the ceiling before they could do the initial testing. And then it was, so even after it was patched, the big holes were patched in the ceiling, walls, and floors. It was retested closer to the final, and air infiltration was reduced by 35%. That's pretty huge. I mean, it was a very leaky house to begin with, but that's pretty big. And then, you can see the rest of it. It performed pretty well, and duct leakage was pretty low. So same equipment, high efficiency equipment was installed. So the as part of the design, the design meeting, when you do a review, the team decided to have goals for building envelope air infiltration. So they looked at the two different situations. If they're going to keep most of the finishes and walls and ceilings, then they set one goal, 30% infiltration, reduction of infiltration. And then if it's down to 25% or less, then the final infiltration must be less than 7. So that was just how they set their goals in the beginning of the project. So the final project is my favorite. It's Rhodes Hall. It was, A.G. Rhodes was a furniture company, or a gentleman that started a furniture company. And this is in Midtown Atlanta. And thankfully it got preserved, but it's pretty, as you can see, pretty stately. And it was finished in, I believe it's 1904. The next slide will show that. But I know my first project at Rhodes Hall was to renovate the original electrical wiring in the house, because it was one of the first electrified houses in the city. And it was old knob and tube, which I'd never heard of until I got there. But it was very, very interesting project. They did other things too, and a lot of the lighting fixtures were just the ceramic light bulb. I call them light bulb holders that were embedded in plasterwork. So, to make them more ornamental. So the plasterwork had to be chipped out and then redone, and it was a very delicate operation to do all that. So, so then we came in and they did a HVAC and other, HVAC, kind of a major retrofit of water and energy savings features. And so basically this is, wow, this is really big. This is actually the home for the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation. So it's not a residential project building anymore. It's offices. It's also used for, as you can see, event space, and until recently they did a lot of events. And a museum. It has some interesting features in stained glass that tells the story of the Civil War, and or at least certain people's version of the Civil War. But it did really well on the Energy Star score, and you can find out more about it on the Georgia Trust website. So that's my presentation. For more information, please go to our website or give me a call. I'd love to tell you more about EarthCraft. So.
Thanks, Laura. Those are encouraging projects. Would you tell us a little bit about how the program works for someone who wants to work with it? Is it
Sure.
How they get involved
Sure.
and then what it looks like to work with you?
Yeah, it's well, you can access. It's kind of like most sustainability programs, right? You have like a scorecard or a worksheet that you go through with the team. And a lot of the points that you get are for keeping things. Like, we're not going to just take out the beautiful, glass windows. We're going to keep them. Okay, you get points. We're going to keep, we're going to keep the existing doors and hardware. Okay, you get points. So it's kind of like, instead of getting points for replacing something for more efficient, you get points for keeping the original, whatever it is, different pieces and parts and elements of the building, right? And we've been we've been working with a fire station in Atlanta, and it's taken about 4 years, and they still haven't put a nail in wood yet. But anyway, so we have EarthCraft technical assistance and EarthCraft builder training. So you can go to builder training, or the builder needs to go to builder training. And we're doing those. There's modules online that you can take builder traiing. Technical assistance we provide in-house, or there's some available outside of the city. And if you're interested in being an EarthCraft technical assistant, you can go online. Basically, you're a HERS writer with some more education and experience. And so anyway, so you do a design review with the team, and you do a building assessment, and you do, usually you'll do your baseline air sealing and air test and blower door test and deck test. And then there's inspections through the construction projects, usually for air sealing and insulation. Kind of depends on the scope, how that works. And then there's the final test. So most everything is verified on site. So it's really not a whole lot of, it's not burdensome documentation. It's pretty light in the, Your design is a lot of the documentation, and then it gets verified on site.
Yeah. So is it fair to say that it's simultaneously looking at and sort of guiding people through both simultaneously the preservation and the improvement
Yes.
process? Yeah.
Yes, that's a good assessment. It's true.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
All right. Brent Hull.
That's great. I think that you guys are doing that. I wish there was a program like that here in Texas. I think that's awesome stuff. I guess we're coming at it from a little bit different deal. I'll need to find my screen here. You guys see that?
Yes, sir.
Are you seeing my split screen?
We're seeing your PowerPoint. But we're seeing, all of the PowerPoint. You haven't started the slideshow yet.
Technical difficulties here. Sorry. Well, anyway, so I just wanted to start out just kind of laying out what my biases are. My goal is not to build the most energy efficient houses. I'm not that guy. I'm trying to be a master builder. I'm trying to be a guy who is building beautiful houses like were built 200 years ago. I believe historic houses need to be insulated. I think we should have duct testing. I think we should have high energy efficient equipment put in there. I also think that old houses are better looking than new houses in a general sense. I think craftsmanship was better on old houses than on new houses. I think that for those reasons, it's a good decision or good reason to save them and preserve them. I think we learn a lot from them when we do that. Part of the challenge is that we're in a confusing landscape. I think that it's hard because there's a lot of voices about what's best, about what is most beautiful, about what works, what doesn't. And so I think that it becomes very confusing. Modern architecture, on one hand, the house on the left is, I can't imagine, is very efficient. And then the other house is actually a restaurant. It's called the Suspended Matter Box, right? I don't know what to do with that, right? And as a builder, I don't know how to, take that and do something with it. So I think that you have people preaching that energy efficiency is the most important thing. You have guys like Justin and I thinking that historic houses are much better than new houses. So again, it's a confusing landscape. There's a number of things that's happened over, 120, 30-year period, a post-industrial world that that contributes to the challenges of building great today. One of those is basically this discount culture, the Walmartization of things, as I call it. Starting in the five and dime with Montgomery Ward's, talking about the cheapest, the lowest price. When we start doing that, when we go down that road and everything's about, the cheapest, everything needs to be a bargain, and we fight to get a lower price, we lose sight of, as builders, in my opinion, what matters, craft and quality and longevity. And so I think there's a danger in chasing after this discount culture. I personally hate that builder hardware, is kind of the cheapest hardware on the market, right? That as builders, our product our hardware should be the best on the market. I think that speaks to the fact of, what we're doing and how we're constructing and how we're building. So this is 1890s. The discount culture starts, right? Obviously, we've got Walmart and Amazon today. And then in the 1940s, you're talking about the rise of production building. Realize that, after 1940 that you begin to have a cookie cutter house, right? The idea of having a cookie cutter design where all the houses look the same really only starts with production building in the 50s and 60s. You think about words like McMansion, right? That's a 1980s invention. And so there is problems with production building because it values speed over quality. It values cost over longevity. And so, again, it contributes to this confusing landscape. And then finally, this the problem with technology is that we are fooled into thinking that technology will solve our problems. I ripped this out of a building magazine, a number of years ago. But this lie is perpetuated if you go to woodworking shows where they talk about these machines are going to save you money, save your business, and what you're doing when you buy, this is a CNC machine, okay? You've got a flat table there, you've got a computer on the left, and you basically set the wood on the table, punch in numbers to the computer, and that router basically cuts out parts. We lose craft, okay? We lose design when we do this. Design becomes whatever comes available in the library where this thing is, comes from, right? So you're given a library of suites, and you have a very limited number of things that you can build, right? You can put custom designs into it, but it's kind of garbage in, garbage out. So I think technology makes us lazy. Think of the microwave, think of email, just that the things that make our modern life faster, and it tells us lies. And so technology cheats us. And so the problem with this discussion in my mind is that we are fooled into false pretenses. We're fooled into thinking things that aren't true. So where I have to start then is with building traditions. Like what is the what's the landscape? Backing up the 30,000 foot view, what matters, what's important? If you think about the longest lasting, right, best designed buildings, they're the Greek and Roman temples, and they're the Gothic cathedrals in France and England, right? Those are the buildings that were built with very low technology. Those are the buildings that were built by hand, right? There was no power tools, there was no AutoCAD, and yet they last for hundreds and thousands of years. And that, to me, is a model for how we should be building going forward. It's ironic to me that our best built, longest lasting buildings are built during a time of very low technology. And now we're in a period of very high technology, and I think many of the buildings we build are disposable. Here in Texas, they built the ballpark. It was called the ballpark, built 20, 30 years ago. Beautiful building. It was torn down last year, maybe 20 years old, to build the new ballpark, right? Incredibly wasteful, right? The life cycle of these buildings ends up being really, really short. When you think about the building tradition of how long things have been lasting, how long we've been building houses, right? 2,000, 4,000 years, a very long time. It is a rich tradition, in my opinion. How long have we been practicing building science? Maybe it starts in the 1970s, right? I remember my dad was really excited because he bought ceiling fans for our house, and how they were going to make our house more energy efficient. So I remember those discussions happening then. But I would say, so if we've been practicing building science for 50 years, how long have we been practicing good building science, right? There's things that I did 10 or 15 years ago in the name of building science that I don't think I would do anymore. Foam insulation, open cell foam insulation in the attics, we've had a real problem with. And so anyway, there are things that we're practicing. I don't think we've had long enough to practice these things to really know whether we're doing what's right. And an example I would bring up is that in the turn of the century, fire and fire prevention was what drove the industry. You think of the great fires in Chicago and San Francisco, and you look at building deeds and restrictions that were written around the turn of the century, and they were about building a house that was fireproof. Well, in the 1930s, they invented a product called asbestos, and asbestos became this wonder product that you would put onto a house, and it could be a ceiling tile. It was very lightweight. Came in many different colors. Became this wonderful product that solved so many problems and solved this fire problem, right? Well, now we look at it and say, gosh, that's kind of a crappy product we were putting on our houses, right? It wasn't good for us. And so I just wonder, right, what is the asbestos that we're putting in our houses today, right? What is the thing that we're doing that, is just wrong? And so I don't think we've been practicing building science for long enough. And like I said at the beginning, we practice some building science, but if you look at what we should be doing, right, as builders, to build the best houses, I think we're, chasing after fire prevention, and we may be inventing some things like asbestos. I think the other thing that is difficult is lead, right? I think lead is deeply flawed. I think that there are ways to jack your score up with lead that make your building gold or platinum or whatever else, but I think the findings are that those buildings aren't really performing to what they've been called out to do. So again, I just think it's early in the argument to be talking about building science. As far as if we're talking about what's best, right? I'm not sure building science necessarily is right now. I think there's also a beauty argument. Justin brought it up and talked about design, right? That if you look at this house built in 1910 versus this house built in 1990, right? Both are built under, built the same way, and they're probably plan book houses, right? Limited number of sheets. The house on the left, the craftsman style house, in my opinion, has a design philosophy, has a style that the moldings, the doors, the brackets, all those things speak to an ideal, a philosophical ideal that makes it beautiful, that makes it well designed. And we know from the period with the natural products and the things that it's well crafted as well. I mean, it is, over 100 years old, and, there it is still standing. This house built in 1990 with the, Walmartization, the discount culture, with the, cookie cutter houses and production building, with the technology, is ugly. It is not a good looking house. This is a house made from a box of or a book of stickers, right? Let's put an oriel on the front. Let's put a gable here. Let's put shutters on this window where they don't fit, right? All these different things that are happening on these things. Beauty matters, right? Beauty matters to our culture, and people want to live in beautiful places. People take care of houses when they're beautifully constructed, right? And so when we build beautiful things, when we do things that, draw people to them, you create more value. And so there has to be a conversation about beauty if we talk about, how we should be doing things. And then just solutions, what's the greenest solution? What should we be doing here, right? The most wasteful thing is when we tear down an historic building or a historic house and try to build a new house that's more efficient. I think that we are, I don't think we really understand, the efficiencies of buildings very well yet. I've read articles where the most energy efficient buildings in New York were the ones that were built before 1940 because they had the thermal mass and the brick and the other things that made them a much more efficient building, despite having not the air conditioning and some of the other things that would make a building efficient. The glass boxes that they're building right now are not efficient. The carbon footprint in New York is, majority of the waste, the energy waste is going because of these buildings are built inefficiently. So, it's troubling to me that we're just not quite there yet. We talk about preservation and preserving buildings. Preservation teaches us a great deal. Preservation teaches us not only how to build, but how to design. When you have to recreate a built-in cabinet or recreate a eave cornice return or build something so that it fits and matches something that's rotten, you learn, you become a better craftsman. And as you study those buildings and study those houses and understand that they were built around a design philosophy, and that those parts and pieces all contribute to that design philosophy, we learn. So there's a lot to be taken from the preservation of old buildings, that we remember our history, remember where we came from, and there's huge value in that. So my goal as a builder is not necessarily to teach my guys all about building science, right? We do study building science. We do want to make our buildings energy efficient. There are some things that we were doing that were stupid, right? That you know, the duct testing, where, you know, ducts were just incredibly wasteful, right? There are good things that are part of that. But I would much rather my guys learn how to build. I'd much rather get my guys learn how to create and build and craft details that are going to last 100 years, as opposed to, you know, taking things out that are and putting in new things that are disposable. And the last kind of piece is that there is a zombie apocalypse kind of standard, where, you know, in a zombie apocalypse, with you lose power and everything else, which neighborhood do you go to? Okay, I don't think you go to the new energy efficient neighborhood, because I don't think those houses breathe, right? These huge sheets of glass that don't open, don't allow fresh air in. You don't go live in a Yeti, right? You go into a house that is going to, you can open windows where things are going to breathe. It's a problem in my mind that we're building houses that require energy to recirculate air and bring fresh air into a house. That to me is a big problem. And I don't think that if we lose all the power, that people go and live in those houses. And I just don't think we're there yet. And so I think there's huge value in, you know, chasing preservation and learning how to build as we go down this path of building science. And so it's trying to find that balance.
Thanks, Brent. Hey, so I'm going to jump in. I have a bunch of questions for you, but there's, you know, if someone's watching the chat box, so if, you know, interrupt me if you guys want to ask some questions too. So the first, I'm going to start off with where you left off, Brent. What that question about or that comment about houses breathing and you know, sort of the passive survivability maybe of a house if it doesn't have power, and I think there's some common understandings of what it means to build a house, you know, the whole build type ventilate right idea, and there's some common misunderstandings. And I think you're you're looking at it from a completely different point of view. And I'm curious, what's the solution in that sense? Like, you know, this isn't about classical architecture, traditional architecture, that, you know, because we could build a house that looks very traditional and it can be tight and ventilated mechanically, or it cannot be. So where do you fall down on that? Like, how would you build a house when it comes to ventilation and air tightness?
I don't understand the question. I would build it so it's as energy efficient as possible, right? But I would not, for instance, I wouldn't put a triple pane window in the house. I think that is a 10-year product, maybe a 15-year product before that seal breaks and you're replacing that piece of glass. So I would think that there's a standard that you're saying, I want things to last 100 years without major maintenance. And so I can't put a product in that house that's going to last 10 to 15 years. And so that's one standard of how I'm building things, right? It's just, if we're truly going to build a house that lasts, 100 years without major maintenance, we can't put products that only last, 15 or 20 years.
And so I'm sorry my question was confusing, but what about air tightness? You said you would build it as energy efficient as possible, but energy efficient as possible generally means airtight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm waffling on that right now as a builder. We've built. I told you I had some problems with foam. We have had 3 projects now where there's been a leak in a roof, and that leak has sat there for 2 years before we began to see paint peeling in the ceiling, and opened that up and found the foam just full of water. And so I think it's less important. I think that's introducing an environmentally unsafe condition for my client. So I would rather use, a cellulose or some kind of product like that is, it may not go all the way to the ceiling. It may sink down over time. I'm not chasing 99.9%. I'm chasing, on the energy efficiency front, there's some really low-hanging fruit, a very energy efficient SEER rating on the HVAC. We try to get 20 and 21 SEER rating, right? Variable speed motors, spiral duct with that's insulated as opposed to flex duct. I mean, there's just low-hanging fruit that seems to me to be very easy to do. But I would rather, as far as the walls go, I would rather create thermal mass with solid masonry than I would with, a 2x6 and foam.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. I'm also curious, I guess the type of building that you're talking about, and I agree with a lot of what you said in terms of, reverence for craftsmanship and beauty, and how we do lose a lot of that in our sort of throwaway world. Like, no doubt about it. I don't think many people would disagree with you on that. Do you think though that the type of building that you're talking about can provide a solution for, the great amount of housing that we need today for people?
Realize that my goal as a builder is not to solve the housing crisis, right? I'm much more concerned about craft and beauty than I am about, production. Okay, so I'm just not on that path of trying to figure that out. Now, I think that, there are examples of ways to build, right? I think the traditional new traditional developments are a good thing. I think if you look at some of the things that the new urbanists are doing as far as the kind of communities that they're building that are more mass, that are more production building, where they're reintroducing front porches, where they're reintroducing, sidewalks, where they're reintroducing some of these things is a healthier way to go. It is looking back. If you read the book Suburban Nation, where they talk about building seaside, and they talk about how they did that, they looked back to the past to look at how neighborhoods were put together. They weren't gated communities where the rich people lived, and apartments where the poor people lived, right? They were intermixed, and you had really nice houses, and you had people living in the back of the houses or up in attics and other different places. That there was a much more, in my mind, creating a community than anything else. So that's not my bailiwick. I mean, I'm trying to raise the bar for craftsmanship. I'm trying to encourage beauty, and that means that we're building very expensive houses. But I think that it encourages the industry, right? I think that guys look at our work and go, I want to do that, right? And I think that, raises the bar. So I can't comment on anything. So.
No, I think that's a fair answer. I think that, the most extreme energy efficient houses that we're often talking about, on this program too, are at an extreme level, but their influence is hopefully penetrating the building world at large. So, and so the last question I had, based on, you talked about training your carpenters. And so I wonder what it looks like to be a carpenter for you, and what kind of things you are training your carpenters to do, what kind of skills you're helping them to develop.
It mainly happens in our mill shop, but, for instance, the windows that we build, okay? And look, these aren't Brent Hull rules, right? These are me looking at the past saying, what's the best way to build a window, okay? And I believe a really well-built window from the turn of the century, made of really great wood with single pane glass and putty glazing, will last 100 years. And I know that because we restore those windows all the time, and they've lasted 100 years, and they're going to last another 100 years because we've taken care of them. So it means that we are practicing building methods that were done 100 years ago. We're building doors with through mortise and tenon and wedge joints. We are copying the joinery on a double hung window with the check rail. We are practicing putty glazing. We're carving when we can, right? It's just like that preservation thing. When you are building, rebuilding a 1920s English Tudor, and you've got to rebuild paneling on the wall, you learn a heck of a lot. So that's the way we're teaching our guys. Typically when a guy comes into our shop and he hasn't worked for us, the first thing we have to do is tell him to slow down. Because if they've been in a production shop, he's used to building boxes, okay? And he's slapping together boxes. We build everything on a bench, right? And that's unusual for a cabinet shop, right? Is that we're bench building things. And so it's an attitude of slowing down and then practicing the old ways of building.
Yeah. The last question I'm going to ask for now is actually for Emily. This is a little bit from left field, but I'm just curious. Brent showed some photos of really modern houses, and I agreed with something that he said, which is that he said these are hard for a builder to understand. And I love modern architecture, but I don't understand it. And so I'm curious from a perspective of an architect, are there precedents in modern architecture that you can see? And can you look at a modern house the same way that we can all look at old houses and understand them?
Yeah, you absolutely can. And I think there's a lot to that is that somebody said it in the chat box, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And there are a lot of different styles throughout architecture. And there are things that people really, really hate in modern architecture, like the Boston City Hall. Everybody hates that concrete building and they want to tear it down. But the truth is it's cost so much in embodied carbon and energy to dispose of that concrete building that they'll never tear it down. So that thing's going to be preserved forever. But at the time when they built that, it was this whole brutalist architecture style. And there are a lot of architects out there who love some of these things. And there are cases for keeping a lot of this modern architecture. I actually have had several clients who've come to Maine. Maine's known for a lot of very traditional architecture who have said, the modern house I want doesn't exist here. Can you help me? And so we've done some new houses because they would love to have different modern takes. And there are rules to anything that's architecturally significant, whether it's modern, whether it's really old, whether it comes from, 100 years ago, that if it's followed by the rules and it's cared for, there will always be people who will love it.
Great.
So I think the thought process there is really caring for it. And we all have different design styles.
Yeah.
I mean, and the things that we like, and caring for them and keeping them, like the house that I don't remember the name of it that Laura showed, that was that beautiful stone house. I mean, the case for keeping that is just amazing. Those, like the Hyde School in Maine, if anybody knows that, was an old house, and they kept that and they turned that into, but they added modern additions to the old Hyde School, and some of those are equally as cool. So maybe not the big glass buildings, obviously, for energy performance. I am not a huge fan of the totally all glass, whatever. But somebody else said in the chat boxes that there hasn't been a lot of careful consideration for the materials that you use to get to the places that we've been, which is maybe a bigger problem in the preservation versus efficiency. Like, you can't use all materials in all different ways. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think you did. So given that we're talking about the intersection of preservation and performance, what are some things that we shouldn't be doing to old houses when we do try to upgrade them, bring them up to performance? Justin, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this. I know Travis has some thoughts on this.
Well, I will say that, so, I mean, many of you know that my wife, Erin, who's in the audience here, works for the State Historic Preservation Office. And so I see a lot of projects coming across her desk, and a lot of the struggles that go along with it, people trying to stay within the lane of what Secretary of the Interior standards are for rehabbing these places. And honestly, often what it comes down to over and over and over again is they want to use spray foam, and then the Secretary of the Interior standards don't allow you to use spray foam. And it really becomes, not that it really can be that simple, but that's like the biggest one in my mind is everybody wants to use spray foam, and maybe we don't have enough alternative details that we can say, I know you want to use spray foam to achieve air sealing here, or to control condensation on this masonry, or to fit into this small cavity, but here's a different way you can do it that we consider to be reversible.
Well, Justin, you just hit on something that I don't want you to go by that too fast. So I'm glad people are being told not to use spray foam for the carbon reasons, but the reversibility matters.
Reversibility is huge. It's huge in historic preservation. They don't want anything that you can't remove. And Aaron can chime in here in the comments. I believe it's so that nothing is permanent. You're not permanently altering the historic fabric of the building. But obviously there's other benefits beyond that, like being able to remove it to do work or to upgrade further in the future. We're in a weird gray area though, because if you don't want, let's say you don't want to use spray foam. I mean, I know you guys have talked about this in other BS and Beer episodes, but the alternatives to it are what, like tapes, sealants, peel and stick membranes. Are those reversible? I don't know. I mean, some of the stuff that we're using is just so damn sticky and gooey that I don't know that that's an any better alternative. Travis, I know you're like as you say, reversibility is your jam. So maybe you could step in here and see some of the things that you've talked about. I really loved what Travis had to say about rock wool.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far down this road because I want to get Laura back in the mix. But very briefly, I will say that I think it's incredibly important that as we build, since I believe that things are generally going to be modified in the future, that we keep in mind these things. And, I realize that air sealing is challenging without tapes and sealants. I use sealants. I think they're easier to remove. Everyone who's ever had to pull trim off has taken their chisel and scraped that caulk bead right off. Sometimes it's old and brittle. It takes a little more effort, but it's reversible. I've had less success removing tapes, even from 10 years ago, that the first butyl tapes on windows were a disaster to get off of anything. They all come apart and it's a disaster. So I'm big on things that are easy to undo because most of my work historically has been remodeling. And one of the things that I do talk a lot about is we really like to use rock wool because when we remodel, when we take it out, it's still as useful as the day you bought it. It holds its shape, its density, and you can put it back in, often on the same job. But I don't have any regrets about putting it into another job. I would never do that with the air filter fabric that is fiberglass insulation, which I take an awful lot of out. We have to frequently have attics vacuumed out of the blown insulation that is full of mouse feces and other disgusting things. Those things are not reusable. So I'm huge in the anti-waste, pro-efficiency game, but I don't have Brent's education on historic architecture or Emily's or many people's. I appreciate what I see. I know what I like, but I don't have that connection to history that builds that value in. For me, it's more about things that are aesthetically pleasing, get attention, they get maintenance, and they live on. If you don't make it beautiful, someone's going to replace it anyway. So it's not an either or for me, it's a yes and. And I would love to hear what Laura has to say about this.
Sure. So there are different details that you can use for preserving, if you want to preserve if you don't want something gooey and sticky, right? But you want to insulate. So rock wool is a great alternative. But if you want to spray foam, what we worked through was a detail where you can use either house wrap or roofing felt or something like that to wrap the your structural members or whatever it is that you're trying to spray foam, and then spray foam so you can remove it later. There are ways you can do that, right? So we like to see rock wool. It's really not that much more expensive, and you can see your leaks if it leaks, right? So for under a roof, that would be great, or over a ceiling. I noticed somebody wrote a comment about using old mills. We did have a really interesting multifamily project that was a renovated mill. And it was a great choice because this particular mill was probably pre, electric lights. And so it had huge windows and not a very deep footprint, it was a narrow footprint so the light can infiltrate. So, but they, the project team kept, basically the exterior, the floors and the roof, and then, infilled in the middle to build units. And that worked really well. Turned out to be a really nice project. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth noting that in the comments, they're talking about adaptive reuse. And Brian was talking about affordable housing. I mean, the intersection between those two is just, there's tons of potential there. And you have all of the weight of the states leaning into it and trying to make it as attractive as possible.
Sure.
So I don't think I think there's a great solution where those two intersect. And I don't know if you guys have talked about that on this show yet.
And Justin, you're talking about like turning an unused factory building into apartments and situations like that could really, a lot of cities could benefit from. And actually, even in certain parts of the country, lots of small towns could benefit from.
Absolutely. And there are tons of them, they're just and a lot of them are just sitting completely vacant and they're gorgeous. And I've seen them renovated. I've been up close and personal with them, and they are gorgeous. And it's totally worth it. They can totally revitalize a town just by having a couple of those old factory buildings brought back to life and made into apartments. And usually there's some. Laura might be able to back me up on this. Usually I believe there's some associated criteria that a certain percentage of it has to be affordable housing.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, we've had projects. We had a hospital in Hawkinsville, Georgia, that was adaptive reuse. We've had what else? Some schools, old schools, and they're beautiful. The old schools are built so much better than a lot of schools these days. They're just beautiful buildings. So yeah, there's quite a bit of adaptive reuse around. Not enough, in my opinion, because you still see beautiful buildings just rotting, so it's we
Yeah, I just think in general, people are very quick to consider, we have an old colleague, Brian, who used to call it the hysterical society, or that, and I'm not of the belief that just because it's old, it's worth saving. Sometimes old is beyond its useful life. It needs to be taken down. It's not safe. It has no significance to somebody. But I also do kind of find it baffling that, like, why have I never seen anybody build a Victorian? Or why is nobody building an Italianate house? Like, it seems like the only new house we build is a McMansion. Like, there's only one style now. It's very bizarre to me.
It just goes back to Brent's conversation about cost. Those details, have you ever seen anyone carve an egg and dart? All the little turned finial pieces and all the cornice work, that stuff's incredibly labor intensive, as I'm sure Brent could attest to. That's not that's not an available detail to a very large portion of the home buyers that are looking. Help me out there, Brent.
That's exactly right. I didn't hear all of what Justin said on that in the end of that deal, but about Victorians. But I think in general we've forgotten how to build, and the examples that I see of people trying to build Victorians, oh boy, the proportions are wrong, the materials are wrong, the scale is wrong, the quality's not there, and it's almost as bad as the people who try to rebuild Versailles. It's just, and I've had clients say, I want to build a Versailles house, and unless you're the richest person in the world, right? Don't do it. And so, those Victorians were, and this is kind of part of the lesson of preservation. The quality of materials that they used on that Victorian house were really, even though they're mass production, they were really high quality. And so to reproduce the brackets, to reproduce the turnings and the other things like that, it's expensive. I mean, it's a, $500 to $800 a square foot house to redo it properly. I think that's part of the reason you don't see it. It's just hard.
I also think that, for all the contractors and the architects in the audience, I mean, you just have to decide where your own line is in the sand. I mean, if somebody comes to you and says, I want to build a new house and I want vinyl siding, that's one thing. If they have an old house with peeling paint and they say, I just don't want to spend all the money it's going to take to scrape and repaint this siding, so I'm just going to cover it with vinyl, can you do it? Then maybe the answer is no. I mean, maybe it really, what's your gut tell you about what's appropriate and what's not? Maybe, for this example, you have no problem with vinyl siding in general. It's a great rain screen. It doesn't need to be repainted, whatever. But don't get on board with covering up and, causing more problems to old houses. Don't throw away the old windows. Just find somebody who knows how to fix them. They can all be taken apart and put back together again. Storm windows, interior or exterior.
Those are changes you can only make from within. You have to get that job to bring that client on board and win them over. They have to see your vision for what has value. And if you can win them over and convince them of what is important to the aesthetic of their house and what makes it a beautiful home that they want to raise their kids in, or they want to entertain at, or whatever their stage of life is, if you can build that value into that home, then you can save those elements. And you can sell them on the other things that make the house more comfortable and efficient too. Right. But you've got to win them over first. And if you just say, oh, I can't do that, then I don't think you can affect that change. For me, personally.
What we call that, Travis, is we call that educating our client. And we have to do that all the time. And where you are, realize that they just don't know as much as we do. And so their comment that we're just going to put vinyl siding over this thing is probably due to ignorance, right? They just don't know that the quality of the wood. Their neighbor told them at a cocktail party, well, just do this, this will be fine. And so education is everything that we're doing. So I couldn't agree more. Brian, I actually have a question for you.
Sure.
What did you think about?
What's your problem?
That's the second question. The first question is, to my comment, that we don't know what asbestos we're putting into our houses.
Yeah.
How far along are we on the building science, trail? Are we? I think we're neophytes, right? Are we further along than that? How many things are we going to be fixing later? And how much do we really know?
I don't think I can answer that. I think we know. I think we're pretty sophisticated about knowing how to measure how houses and pay attention and monitor how houses are performing. When they're built and when we commission them and people start to live in them, we can pay pretty close attention. Now, I'm glad that a lot of people are starting to actually monitor houses over the long haul. There's some people in this audience who are putting moisture sensors in the walls and tracking moisture content and accumulation ongoing as their builds are lived in by occupants. And so it's encouraging that we're going to learn a lot, I think, in the next little bit about what we're doing. But Brent, I have the same question as you. In fact, when I interview people for the work that I do, one of the questions I like to ask is, what are we screwing up right now? I'll tell you what the answer I get the most is, and it's not necessarily screwing up, but the answer I get the most is people say our reliance on tapes. I'm really concerned about our reliance on tapes. So I think that's one thing that I think a lot of people, and even the people that are using them extensively, because it's sort of the pivot that the industry has made. But so even people that are using them in their work and to get to the levels of performance that they get to and water management and all of that are concerned about that and are curious about if that's going to be the thing that we look at in 10, 20, 30, 40 years and say that didn't work very well. But we don't know for sure if that'll be it or if it'll be something else. Clearly a lot of people hopped on board with spray foam insulation, in the last few decades. And now from whether it's the old house people or the people who are concerned about embodied carbon, now, everyone's saying, whoa, hold up. Maybe that's not the solution we thought it was, to all these issues.
In our market, there's a production builder who was telling me about a building credit he gets now for spraying foam. And I knew when he said that, for the crap that he's building, I knew I had to jump off the foam bandwagon. I mean, it's become this, that solves everything. And right. I don't think it does. I think it's the pendulum has swung too far. We just got to be careful.
Yeah, I agree.
I was going to say, yeah, someone in the chat box also said, there's also a confusion with building technology and building efficiency, which are not, mutually, they're not the same thing. So, and we have to test some of these products to find out whether they are good or bad. And we can't, stop technology and moving forward in what we're doing by not doing some of these products. But a couple of episodes ago, we did one on embodied carbon, and it's actually, people who have listened to me know that I have a real thing about windows too, and things about spray foam, and I'm lots of things to say about all of those. But that some of these industries, we spend a ton of money investing in this technology instead of taking that investment and investing in carbon-based materials, which in my mind was the wrong direction that we went. And that's a building technology and not necessarily an efficiency thing. That's just the products that we use. And you're exactly right, as too many people don't know how to use these products correctly. And so when they put spray foam into their building thinking that it's the solve all problems, it's really not, because they don't understand the dynamics of the entire system.
Incomplete building science is dangerous. Complete understanding of the systems working together or against, this element works against this, we can't use these together. That's, I think, effective use of building science. But yeah, there's a lot of people who are practicing one element of building science in a vacuum in their mind, and that's not the way the site doesn't work that way. The site doesn't care that you didn't solve for this. The chemistry does what it does, the physics do what they do. It's I don't think it's any different than Brent's opposition to bad design, poor millwork choices. It's the same. You have to have a complete understanding. You're building a whole house. You're not just casing a window. You're not just replacing the crown in that room. The kitchen has to work with the dining room. They go together. It's a system.
Someone just made a good point in the chat that building science is actually physical science. It's really the question really is how are we doing at controlling these physical sciences within our buildings? Are we doing that successfully and appropriately in a way that's going to last and not cause issues down the road? So we have just a couple minutes left. I don't think we've taken many questions from the chat tonight. We try to get to some. The three that I jotted down are kind of real specific, but and they're all for Brent, and I'm just going to fire them off and just see what you think, Brent. The first one is, what do you think of creating historic moldings on a CNC machine?
There's got to be a balance, right? And so if we just did a job where we built 150 windows, right? And so we had arch top windows that we made, in a production sense. We were making double hung windows, but it was faster to cut the brick mold on a CNC, and so we did. And so that doesn't mean the question really is, the problem really is when you throw out your best millwork guys that know how to do curved millwork because you bought a CNC machine. CNC machine is a tool. It should be used as a tool. It isn't an answer. Like guys make it an answer that if I have this, I don't need anybody in my shop. I can do everything myself. And so, because it forces you to build a certain way. And so we use the CNC. It's a tool. It's just like a curve shaper. It's just like anything else. And so as long as it's used that way, then it's healthy.
All right. Someone else had asked, what do you think of Frank Lloyd Wright homes?
Some things are genius. Some things are terrible. I mean, I was at the Roby house, and that's that upstairs room at the Roby House with all that leaded glass is probably one of the coldest rooms in America in the winter. And it's just, you know, it's beautiful design. Is it function? You know, apparently they didn't spend a lot of time in that room because it was so cold. It was all leaded glass. And so, I don't know. I don't think he's as a millwork guy and as a carpenter and a craftsman, I appreciate him. But he's pretty low on my top guys list. Like I think Asher Benjamin, William Buckland, you know, Samuel McIntyre, I have them much higher on the list than Mr. Wright.
All right.
And that goes back to your question about education too, because if you asked any person who was not an architect or historian enthusiastically to name one architect, I bet that's the only one they can name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, last question that I jotted down was, what's your beef with triple pane windows?
Well, remember that
they make no sense in Texas.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, so we got forced into, as a builder, we got forced into doing insulated glass when insulated glass makes no sense in Texas. And so there's an immediate beef there. They're warranted for about 10 or 15 years, and then they start clouding up. And so, again, if you're trying to build, and remember, most of the stuff we're doing is very traditional, right? Double hung windows, divided light windows, right? And so insulated glass window, single pane, true divided light, you know, you get some ugly details there. And so why spend more for a product that doesn't work in our environment and will only last about 15 years? It's just stupid. And so again, if our goal as an industry is to build long lasting, the most sustainable houses are the ones that last the longest. Do you put in a product that will only last 15, 20 years? I don't know. I mean, I don't build houses that require triple pane windows. So yeah, I don't have that much experience with them. I only know of my experience in my world, and I don't like them.
All right. Well, we've got just a few minutes left at 7:25, and this is the point where we usually look for some sort of parting thoughts. I think it was an interesting discussion tonight. We covered a whole bunch of territory, so I'm going to suggest that we go around the horn and everyone just take a moment for some parting thoughts. And on my screen, the horn starts with Emily.
Thanks everybody for joining us, especially our guests tonight. There's definitely this big push between preservation and keeping a lot of things that are architecturally significant, whether they're homes or bigger buildings, or especially as Justin was talking about, renovating a lot of these old mill buildings into housing because we need more housing, and maybe the answer isn't to build more McMansions. Obviously not a big fan of those. I think that there's a good balance between efficiency and preservation for sure. And, you know, keeping the structures that we have from the start is low embodied carbon, and the level at which you get to before you just start putting solar panels on is questionable. So, and that building science is not in a vacuum, and that everybody, for education, both architects and builders, everybody's knowledge needs to come back up so that craft becomes something that we push from our profession, not gets pushed from the homeowners or real estate perspective. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Emily. Mr. Fink?
Well, I would say that, you know, I mean, we pretty much kicked your asses in terms of this argument. I mean, you guys have not convinced me one bit that we should tear down the old houses and build more efficient ones. I mean, where's the argument against, Brian? I mean, where's Mike Main? This is the night he decides to sit out?
Wait. No. We were not the argument here. We wanted to hear your perspective.
No. You guys all
we
felt
talk
like
every week about our perspective.
Justin,
we gave you 1 week.
I put a lot of ammunition in the quiver for the next time we talk, but this is a public forum.
You want to tussle, Justin? I'm your Huckleberry. Let's go, buddy. I'm not trying to tear down your house, man. I just want it to not waste as much energy, and I want it to. I keep saying in the chat box, it's not either or. It's yes and.
Yes.
Keep the aesthetic beauty. Make it beautiful so no one tears it down and throws it away. but make sure that it's comfortable in the house, because that single glazed window that Brent builds is probably perfect in Texas. And I'm sure it's beautiful, more beautiful than most windows that I've handled. Unfortunately, if you put it in a house in Minnesota, my friend Randy Williams is tearing it out and it's going in the dump. And that's the tragedy of it. You have to have performance and beauty. You cannot make it an either or argument. This has never been about trying to tear down the old houses and throw them away. It's about the priority of make it a durable building for its occupants. It has to be comfortable to be durable.
Yes.
All the factors matter. It's not one or the other. It's always both. But I can't justify chipping out all the glazing on these single pane windows in these beautiful Brookside homes that I'm redoing and reglazing them, because the window's still going to leak air. The massive gap between the frame where the sash weights are traveling and the uninsulated wall cavity needs to be addressed so that the child can sleep in that room without 4 blankets. And the energy costs will eventually go up. I realize that energy is cheap now, and that's motivating our design. Like Brent said, price matters. The motivation to do the cheap is not the thing we should be chasing all the time. We want the beautiful aesthetic. We want to save what is good, but not everything old is good. And you haven't said that, but that's my 2 cents. Sorry to jump in on my around the horn.
Yeah, it wasn't your turn, Travis.
Yeah, I mean, come on, Travis.
Brent.
Travis, talk to me after, Travis. I can help you out with those window weights and how you can insulate those and still keep them.
I know how to do it,
Uh-huh.
but I still want to just go ahead and do it the most efficient way, because labor costs too.
Yeah, I hear you.
I think it's refreshing that we're all talking about the same thing. I don't see us being adversarial here, which is great. And so, our kind of deal is a passion for craft, and what we build defines us. And so I think that what we build matters, right? I don't think that, chasing scores is necessarily the right way to be building. And so that would be my warning, right? Just that I don't want to chase after these things as if that's the solution for building going forward, because craft matters and beauty matters. And so, but no, it's great discussion. It was really refreshing, and I appreciate you guys having me.
Awesome. Laura?
Okay. Sorry. Confusion about muting and unmuting. No, I think the holistic approach, and that's pretty much what to the design, and doing a full analysis of the building, prior to jumping in with construction. So really looking at how is it performing, is it truly in need of, is it done with its useful life, or does it still have some life left, right? And doing that, making the right decisions, right? Not the fast decisions, not the cheap decisions, but the ones that work for that particular building is what's, what the important piece is. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that, the push of folks like Justin and Brent for craftsmanship and beauty and preservation, and the push for, folks like, Emily, many people in our audience, myself, Travis to some degree, he does a great job of finding that sweet spot, but the push towards the super, super, super energy efficient stuff all comes together and influences housing so that we get better housing for not just the rich people who are living in the houses that we're all talking about and looking at and building, but everyone. So with that, thank you so much, Laura, Brent, Justin. What a nice show. What a great lively discussion, lively chat box. Have an awesome night, everyone.
I'll take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
I think this question from Jeremy.
And so all of the buildings we do have a macro grid and a micro grid, and all the elements that we design with fall onto the grid. The structural system, the finished systems, the mechanical systems, the interior partitions, everything actually fits a grid. And that would allow his company, if we adopted this standardization together, we could actually work together. Think how powerful that is. It means that, for instance, in Unity Homes, we actually don't have to design the homes. We assemble the homes, digitally assemble the homes, because all the components are standardized. The bathrooms, the kitchens, the partition locations sort of snap to rule. Stairs are standardized, and they all fit. Everything fits like a Lego, because there's some standards behind it that inform it. And it doesn't mean that you can't customize. You just can't customize out of the infinite sea of possibility. You can customize out of kind of units and increments that would make sense. So that is allowing us to make our buildings ever more affordable, simply because then the components that we make are standardized. The doors, the stairs, the bathrooms, the kitchens, everything is sort of standardized, and they're a lot less expensive, just with us doing it. But if he did it and we did it and you did it, we could actually create a whole lot more efficiency in our across the industry. The construction industry just lags behind, most other industries. If the industry could adopt some standardization, then we could kind of connect the dots, and then somebody out there could be delivering an electrical system to us that would fit, like a wiring harness that would fit, and or a plumbing assembly that would fit, or interior partitions that would fit, and we wouldn't have to make all of that. All we need is some basic standards. There needs to be some basis for the industry to be connected and have some standards so that we can actually make components off-site by some rules, so that when they get to site, there's a reason why they would fit, because they're following the same rules.
You make another excellent point, Ted. The whole standardization process, I think, gets a harsh look perhaps from designers who want to be able to be creative, and everybody wants their own aesthetic when they move into a house, and they want everything to be customizable. But I always try to remind people that we have a standard dimension of lumber that everyone's already using, and we're all used to it, and it's not hard. So the broader adoption of standardization, as you describe, is really a giant leap forward in efficiency and in saving the resources that are so precious.